Hello and welcome to the JSA Studio. I'm your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with the NFC West draft class breakdowns. However, before we get into actually breaking down these four teams and their draft classes, I am going to go ahead and ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. Help me get to 500 subscribers. I would very much appreciate it if you did. We're going to start off this video with the Arizona Cardinals, and with their first pick of the first round here, 4th overall, they selected Marvin Harrison Jr., a wide receiver out of Ohio State. The grade is a B, not because of the quality of player, but because a B is the letter grade that I give to a pick that was made at value. I had a top 5 grade on Marvin Harrison, and you took him in the top 5. That means it is a pick at value, and therefore the grade a B. And ultimately, that really just means that I have very, very high expectations for Marvin Harrison Jr. He received the highest grade I can give a wide receiver, which is a top 5 grade. He is not my number 1 wide receiver of all time. That remains Justin Jefferson, and it'll probably never change. That being said, what would it take for Marvin Harrison to exceed expectations for me? I fully expect Marvin Harrison by year 2 to be a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL and a perennial Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber player. So if he goes 15 years in the league and he makes 10 Pro Bowls and 7 first-team All-Pros, that's him meeting expectations. In order for him to exceed expectations, in my opinion, he'd have to be like an all-time great wide receiver. And he does have that potential. However, hitting for par for him as a top 5 pick and a wide receiver is going to be very, very hard to do. And that's just simply because of what I expect top 5 picks to be. Like, if you're a top 5 player, I expect you to be a franchise-changing talent if you're a quarterback, or a top 10 at a bare minimum player at your position for every other position. So I do believe Marvin Harrison is going to be very, very good. It's just that my expectations for him are tremendously high, so his grade is a B. Moving on to your second first-round pick, 27th overall, you guys selected Darius Robinson, an edge out of Missouri. I gave Darius Robinson a top 75 grade. Not as big of a fan of him as a lot of other people were. Part of that is my own bias against tweeners like Darius Robinson, because the fact remains is that there aren't very many of them that turn into elite caliber players in the NFL. So generally speaking, I don't like the tweeners all that much. That being said, Darius Robinson is a very powerful player. I think if they utilize him correctly, he could end up being a productive player. But even if he hits his ceiling, I probably wouldn't have him graded as a first-round prospect. I don't think there's a ton of upside here. I think there were better, perhaps not initially, but in the long term, there were better prospects to be taken here. Maybe not even necessarily as an edge, but just other positions of need, in my opinion. Your second round selection, 43rd overall, was Max Melton, a slot corner who may or may not move to the outside. I had a grade on him as a slot. However, I don't particularly think that the grade would have changed if I had him graded as an outside corner, which is probably where he's actually going to end up playing for you, is on the outside, specifically because of your 4th round selection, who I think might end up getting moved into the slot. However, even if he does stay at the slot position, I like the pick. I think this is a good player that is a scheme fit for the defense that you guys are running entering into year 2 with the new head coach. And even if he does end up playing on the outside more, I do think he's still going to be a solid player. I had a top 50 grade on him. You guys took him between 41 and 50. Therefore, this is a pick at value. And the grade is a B. Your first of 4 third-round selections was 66th overall. You selected Trey Benson, a running back out of Florida State. I had a top 50 grade on Trey Benson, and he was actually my running back 1, if I am not mistaken. I believe he was my RB1. So I like the fit. I think this is a guy that can be a 250 touches a year bell cow running back sort of player who can take it to the house on pretty much any time he touches the ball. I think he's underrated as a pass catcher. He needs to learn how to block a little bit better, but I don't particularly care about a running back in the blocking game all that much. But this is a all-around really, really, really good player. He was the engine that made that FSU offense tick the past few years. Very, very good player. I like the pick. This was a pick after value. I had a top 50 grade on him. He took him after 50. So the grade is a B+. Your next pick was really the only pick that I vehemently disagreed with outside of Darius Robinson. And taking Isaiah Adams, a guard out of Illinois, here is too early for me. I believe I had a 4th round grade on him, so you're moving up 3 tiers, which is why the grade is a B+. I don't like him all that much. I think he does have potentially a starter upside, but I don't think it's right away, and I don't think he has a whole lot of upside past being an okay starter. That being said, taking him at 71 isn't the end of the world, which is why the grade isn't lower. But I do not particularly understand that selection. I thought that there were a ton of better players along the interior of the offensive line that could have been selected. Up next, your third round selection, another Illinois player, Tip Ryman, a tight end. I had a 4th round grade on Tip Ryman. I didn't include him in my tight end rankings because I forgot he existed. That being said, he's a solid player. A little bit of a reach. I did, in fact, have a 4th round grade on him. You took him in the tier that would be the tier directly above that, which would be top 100. But it's not the end of the world for me. I think he's a role player. That being said, I do actually think he has upside in a offense as a tight end 2, which you guys have Trey McBride. That would be his role. So I don't necessarily think it's all that bad. He's a good run blocker, which is something that Trey McBride somewhat is lacking at. However, Tip Ryman, I think, does have upside as a pass-catching tight end as well. Your final 3rd round pick was actually one of my most favorite players in the entire class that was just outside of my top 10 cornerback rankings, and that is Elijah Jones, a corner out of Boston College. I had a top 75 grade on him. You guys went ahead and selected him 90th overall. That is a pick after value, meaning that the grade is a B+. I love Elijah Jones. I think he has big time upside at the corner position. He's big, he's long, tall, and sufficiently fast and quick enough. I think this, even though he is kind of a project, I think those concerns were a little bit overblown. But he's a really, really good player with a ton of upside. Maybe not CB1 upside, but a really, really good corner 2 upside for Elijah Jones. That's a very, very good pick. He was one of my favorite players in this past draft class. Another one of my favorite players, Dorian Taylor Demerson, a safety, potentially a slot corner, out of Texas Tech. I had a top 75 grade on him. You guys drafted him outside of the top 100, which means that would actually be a 2-tier steal, quote unquote. So the grade is an A-. I really, really like Taylor Demerson. I think there's a very real possibility he is a starting safety or potentially nickel from day one on this defense. He's a really, really good player. He's also got a ton of special teams upside. Your first of 2 fifth-round selections was Xavier Thomas, an edge rusher out of Clemson. I had a 5th-round grade on him. I think he has quality upside as a rotational edge rusher. I don't necessarily see starter traits in him. However, I do think he'll be able to find a role in that rotation early on. Up next, one of the best picks of the entire draft, 162nd overall, you guys selected Christian Jones, an offensive tackle out of Texas. I had a top 75 grade on him. Really, really good player. I was surprised that he fell out of day 2, let alone to the middle of the 5th round. This is a very, very good player. I think he could potentially start day 1, even if not. I think this is a starting caliber offensive tackle in the NFL at some point. This is an A+ grade for me. Your second to last selection, Tajon Palmer, a wide receiver out of UAB. This is a good player. I do think he has potential to maybe be a returner. I'm not sure if he fills that role or not. I am not familiar enough with the Cardinals roster to make that distinction, but I do think he has the potential upside to be that kind of player. The grade is B+, as I had a 5th-round grade on him, and you guys took him in the 6th round. Your last pick, 226th overall, you guys selected Jaden Davis, a cornerback out of Miami. Another guy who could potentially play on the outside or on the inside, in my opinion. However, probably you're looking at a depth piece or a special teams player, especially early on in his career. Now, if you want to know what I think about the draft class as a whole and where it ranks relative to your division rivals, you can go ahead and skip to the end of the video, or you can go ahead and stick around between the next 3 teams. Let's see the best picks section before we end up getting to that. The Los Angeles Rams are next on the clock here, and we're going to go ahead and start off at the top of the draft. 19th overall, you guys selected my number 1 defensive player and number 1 edge in this class, Jared Verse, out of Florida State. I had a top 10 grade on Jared Verse. I really, really, really like Jared Verse. I like the scheme fit as well. I think he's going to be very productive, maybe even potentially a double-digit sack guy year 1. This is a very, very good player. I very much liked Jared Verse. The grade is a B+, as I said earlier. I had a top 10 grade on him, so you took him in the tier below top 10, which is top 20. So therefore, it is a B+, but a very, very, very good player. Your second round selection, 39th overall, was Braden Fisk, an interior defensive lineman out of, you guessed it, Florida State. He's a tad bit undersized, so it is somewhat of a question mark how he's going to hold up in the run game. If it's just straight up man-on-man power run, I don't necessarily think he's going to win those most of the time. However, there are things that you can do with him. Just let him move around, run some stunts and stuff like that, and it's not going to be that big of a deal. Or in obvious power running situations like short yardage situations, don't put his ass on the inside. Put him over a tackle where he'll have a better chance of winning one-on-one. That being said, I did in fact have a top 40 grade on Braden Fisk. I believe he was my IDL 3, if I'm not mistaken. However, I really, really like him as a pass rusher. I think he's got some big time upside as a pass rusher from the interior, and those kinds of players are rare, which is why I had a top 40 grade on him. Very, very good player. Like the fit. Don't expect him to be Aaron Donald. That's the only thing I really got to say here. Don't expect him to be Aaron Donald. I think he'll give you something year 1 on the interior, especially in the pass rush game, but he's not going to be Aaron Donald. Not that anybody's expecting him to be Aaron Donald, but he's not going to be that good, probably. Up next, the Michigan legend himself, Blake Corum, running back. And taking him in the third round, but outside of the top 75, it is a tad bit of a reach for me. I believe I had a top 100 grade on Blake Corum. I think he's a role player, not necessarily just exclusive to being a short yardage back, because I actually think he can be pretty good in the passing game. However, what really holds him back as a prospect in my mind is the fact that when he put on weight, he lost all of his explosiveness. Like, I believe he went from somewhere around probably 190 to 195 in 2022 all the way up to 205, and that's only 10 pounds or 15 pounds. But man, he lost all of his explosiveness. Like, he was clearly not very fast in the long game. Great agility, but just does not have the explosiveness or top end speed to be a home run threat. That being said, he is someone that does have bell cow back potential, and we saw with Kyron Williams and just running backs in general that having multiple good running backs is probably the way to go, especially if you're going to be a more power run first team like I think Los Angeles is pivoting to. Your second third round selection, 99th overall, was Cameron Kitchens, a safety out of Miami. And I like Cameron Kitchens. I think he's a starting caliber safety. I believe he'll be your Jordan Fuller replacement. I think Jordan Fuller left this year, or maybe it was last year. I don't remember. However, I think he's a starting caliber safety day one. Very good player, good in split looks as well as rotating into the deep third. I really, really like Cam Kitchen. I think he's a starting safety. A little bit of a tweener between a free safety and a box safety. Not sure if he's big enough to play in the box full time. Not sure if he's fast enough to play back full time. However, there's just something about him that I just really, really like. And the grade is a B+ for me. Your fifth round selection was Brennan Jackson, an edge rusher out of Washington State University. I had a 6th round grade on him. I think he does have upside as a rotational pass rusher, but I don't necessarily see a whole lot of upside past that. The grade is a B- because I had a 6th round grade on him, and you took him in the 5th round. Your first of 4 6th round selections was Tyler Davis, an interior defensive lineman out of Clemson. I had a 4th round grade on Tyler Davis. I think he's got really good role player / depth piece upside, potentially even sneaking in there as a starter in certain looks. This is a very good player, a little bit of a tweener between a nose tackle and a 3 technique. However, he's very good against the run, and he does have, I think, a little bit of upside as a pass rusher. The grade is an A- for Tyler Davis. Your second 6th round selection, 209th overall, was Joshua Carty, a kicker out of Stanford. I didn't scout kickers this year. I don't really know if he's good or not, but generally speaking, I don't have a problem with drafting kickers in the middle of day 3. So I gave it a B just because. Your 6th round selection, really the only pick I disagreed with in this whole draft class, is going to be Jordan Whittington, the wide receiver out of Texas. I had a priority undrafted free agent grade on him. I was a little bit surprised to see him get drafted, especially to this specific team, because they've got really good depth at the wide receiver position. However, it's not the end of the world. I do think he potentially can play special teams in some roles and end up being a quality depth piece, maybe long term as like a 4th or 5th wide receiver. Up next was one of the best picks of the entire draft. That's Bo Limmer, an interior offensive lineman, center or guard out of Arkansas. I think that's a day 1 starter at either center or guard, especially for this team. That's a really, really good player that fell in the draft for no real reason. Potentially a center because of your next pick, KT Levinston, but I don't really know what the depth chart looks like along the offensive line, but I think he could be a center. I think he could be a guard. Either way, this is a really, really good player. I believe I had a top 100 grade on him, and getting him in the 6th round is a steal with a capital S. That grade is an A+. Your last selection in the 7th round, you took KT Leviston, a guard out of Kansas State. I had a 7th round grade on him. I think this is a depth piece where you're probably don't really want him to be on the field for very long because he's big and powerful, but has almost no agility or quickness to his game at all. I don't necessarily see starter upside with him. I think he's a depth piece long term. Now, if you want to know the overall grade for this draft class, you can go ahead and skip to the end of the video where I talk about it, or you can stick around for these next 2 teams and the best picks section where I go over picks like Bo Limmer, but for all 4 teams in the NFC West. Or you can stick around and watch my opinions on the next 2 draft classes as well. The San Francisco 49ers were up next. And honestly, just not a big fan of this draft class. I don't like it very much. And it starts right off the bat with Ricky Pearsall, the wide receiver out of Florida. I like Ricky Pearsall. I had him graded as a Z. However, he could also play in the slot. I get that they're probably going to trade either Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel, and that they might want to take a wide receiver in the 1st round. But there were a whole list of players I would have taken over Ricky Pearsall. I think Ricky Pearsall is someone who is going to be a productive NFL receiver, but I don't really see high-end talent in him. I think he's going to be someone that's going to bounce around between 800 yards and 1,000 yards and probably 6 or 7 touchdowns and just be a real solid wide receiver too. And that has value, but I don't think that's 1st round value, especially when I had a guy like Keon Coleman who was still on the board here that I liked way more than Ricky Pearsall, and also gives you something different than what you have right now in your receiving core, so it could potentially be a complementary piece. But right now, this just looks like Ricky Pearsall is either going to take over sort of that slot/Z role that Deebo Samuel plays, or that X/Z role that Brandon Ayuk plays whenever they trade one of those 2 after this year, or potentially at the trade deadline. I don't know. I don't like the logic behind the pick because I had a top 100 grade on Ricky Pearsall and I just wouldn't have taken him this high. But I also don't like the thought process that went into this pick. This team didn't lose the Super Bowl because it didn't have options to throw the ball to. You have a top 3 tight end in the NFL. You have 2 top 20 wide receivers in the NFL, arguably a top 10 receiver in the NFL as well in Brandon Ayuk, as well as several other wide receivers on this roster that are real solid and real productive, like Juwan Jennings. And also you have Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield. This team didn't lose because of lack of receiving options. I think this could have been a spot to potentially upgrade the offensive line. This could have been a spot to take somebody on defense that could maybe help you there. I don't know. I don't like the thought process behind the pick, and I don't like the player being taken over several other players that I would have preferred to have had on this team. Moving on here to the 2nd round selection, Renardo Green out of Florida State. He's a corner. I actually really like Renardo Green. I had a top 75 grade on him. This is a pick at value, so the grade is a B. Your 3rd round selection was, in fact, Dominic Pooney, an offensive tackle out of Kansas. I had a 4th round grade on him. Not positive that his potential in terms of starting upside is actually as a tackle. It might end up being a guard, which is fine. This team could use an upgrade at right tackle or either guard spot, in my opinion. And I don't know. I think it's fine. It's not the end of the world. You took him a little bit too early for my taste, but yeah, I'm not going to beat you up too bad. The grade is a B minus for me. At your first of 3 fourth-round selections, you selected Malik Mustafa, a safety out of Wake Forest. Good player, solid upside. I do think he has rotational safety upside, potentially even year one with starter upside down the road. Really nice player. It's going to help out on special teams as well. And speaking of special teams, Isaac Guerendo, running back out of Louisville, was your second fourth round selection. And this is someone that I could see starting on kick return, like day one, because the fact of the matter is that this guy's, I believe, 6 foot and north of 220 and ran 4.3 at the combine. Very, very unique build in the NFL. You don't generally see bigger backs like that running that fast. That being said, I did have a 7th round grade on him. However, there's a little bit of nuance to that take, me having him as a 7th round grade, because I'm about 3 rounds lower on running backs than the consensus just in general. Like, I would never spend a top 20 pick on a running back. I don't believe they add enough value to ever warrant a top 20 selection. So generally speaking, that's 2 or 3 tiers down for most people is where the absolute max of a running back could be for me. So that kind of bumps people down the boards a whole lot. If I didn't have that belief, I probably would have had a 4th or 5th round grade on Isaac Guerendo, because I was actually higher on him than the consensus. I believe he was my RB like 12 or 13, and I really like this running back class. I think he's going to be productive. You don't necessarily need a running back right now because you have the best running back in the NFL in Christian McCaffrey, but I do think he's going to be very, very productive. I don't know if there is a more perfect scheme fit for a offensive player in this entire draft class than Isaac Guerendo to Kyle Shanahan. Your final 4th round selection, 135th overall, was Jacob Cowing, a slot wide receiver out of Arizona. I liked Jacob Cowing more than most people. I think he gets separation. I think he's quick. I think he could potentially be a deep threat from the slot position. Yes, he's small, but he's very, very fast. And I think he adds values on special teams as another player that could be a return candidate on either kick return or punt return. Your 6th round selection was Jarrett Kingston, a guard out of USC. And I had a non-priority undrafted free agent grade on Jarrett Kingston. He was not someone that I would have considered draftable. That being said, they drafted him. The grade's a C+. Not a big fan of that selection, but maybe I'm wrong. It's a definitive possibility. At your 7th round selection, 251st overall, you selected Tatum Bethune, linebacker out of Florida State University. I had a priority undrafted free agent grade on him. Wasn't totally shocked to see him drafted because, again, he was kind of right there. But probably not someone I would have pulled the trigger on. That being said, the grade is a B minus. If you want to know my overall thoughts for this draft class as a whole, you can go ahead and skip to the end of the video, or you can stick around through Seattle, where I talk about them and then the best picks segment before we end up getting to the draft classes as a whole. The Seattle Seahawks are the final team that we will be talking about today in this video here. And let's go ahead and jump right into it with the 16th overall selection. Seattle selected Byron Murphy, an interior defensive lineman out of Texas. So pretty much right out of the gate, right at the end of the college football season, I was like, Byron Murphy is D-tackle 1. It's not close. It's not a conversation. And a lot of people weren't on board with that, especially when I was talking about him as like a top 20 pick. A lot of people were not on board with that, and he ended up going in the top 20. And I had a top 20 grade on him. Now, as the process went on, everyone was like, oh, yeah, that's a dude. But I saw it like right away almost. But a very, very good player. He's going to help this team tremendously, even from day one. And I really like the selection, even though I gave it a B because it is a pick at value. Your third round selection, 81st overall, was Christian Hayes, a guard out of UConn. And I had a top 75 grade on him. I actually think he's going to end up starting for you day one. The past few years, you guys have been trying to figure out that interior of the offensive line. You seem to have gotten the center position figured out with Oluwatimi, the Michigan man there. And I think you've got one guard here now with Christian Hayes. I think this is a long-term answer at left or right guard, whichever side you decide to play him on. Really, really good player with a good amount of upside, too. I don't know necessarily about Pro Bowl, but like I think he could be a really, really good player for this team. Your first of two fourth-round selections was Tyrese Knight, a linebacker out of the University of Texas, El Paso, or UTEP. And this one I don't get. Taking him, in the 6th or 7th round, okay, maybe, because I had a priority undrafted free agent grade on him. Taking him in the 4th round, especially when the linebacker position was not particularly heavy hit at this point in time, I don't know about that. I don't like that one very much. That's not a pick that I can get behind a whole lot. It'd be different if he was like a elite caliber athlete. I probably would have him graded higher, but he's not. I don't know. I don't get it. I think maybe he's a special teams contributor. I don't really see any starting or role player potential for him. I don't know. I very easily could be wrong. That's a definitive possibility. After all, I'm just some asshole giving you his opinion. That's the whole point of the channel. However, your next selection, AJ Barner, is one that I think I'm going to be higher on than most people. I think AJ Barner will be a starting caliber tight end in the NFL. This is a really, really good player. Excellent blocker, a good, not great athlete, underutilized in the passing game at Michigan because they had a potential first-round pick at tight end in Colston Loveland, as well as they didn't throw the ball a whole lot. But I really, really like this selection for you guys. I think he's another weapon over the middle for Geno Smith, as well as someone who's going to be able to help you in the run game. This is a good player, and I like the pick. Your 5th round selection, 136th overall, was Nehemiah Pritchett, a defensive back out of Auburn. I say DB because I'm not sure where he plays. I think a conversion to safety could be in his future. Potentially could see him playing in the slot, but I would prefer to keep Devon Witherspoon there, especially with a later selection that you made that I really, really like that we'll talk about in a minute, who I think is going to end up starting for you on the outside. However, I'm not positive I see the vision with this selection. I had a 5th round grade on him, so the grade is a B because it's a pick at value. But I'm not sure where he's going to end up playing for you long term. It could be safety. It could be in the slot if Devon Witherspoon decides to stay outside or whatever. But again, I would actually prefer to just keep Devon Witherspoon in the slot. I think that's where his future is in the NFL. All that being said, I do like Nehemiah Pritchett. I think he's a quality player. I think Auburn had a very, very underrated secondary this past year. All 3 of the Auburn DBs that got drafted this year are players that I really, really liked. Your next selection, Satoa Laumea, an offensive lineman out of Utah. Not sure if he ends up sticking at tackle or guard. I believe he played tackle in college. I think maybe he could do it if this was on the right side. Either way, it's a quality depth piece. I did, in fact, have a 6th round grade on him. So that grade is a B. I'm actually going to skip DJ James here in a second. I'm going to real quickly. Your second 6th round pick, 207, was Mike Jarrell, a tackle out of Findlay. I didn't have a grade on him, so I'm not going to go ahead and give you a numerical grade, not numerical, alphabetical grade here with this selection. I'm just going to leave it blank, and it's not going to take into account my grade for the overall draft class. Okay. That being said, DJ James was a phenomenal pick. I love DJ James. DJ James might have been the biggest my guy in this entire draft class. I like DJ James a lot. I think he's a very, very good player. I think he did a lot of really good things for Auburn. I think he's got some versatility if you want him to have versatility. I think he's an understated athlete. And more so than that, I think he's a fantastic scheme fit for Mike Macdonald. This could be a starting corner for you day one. This is a really, really good player. I think DJ James is a player to watch for this draft class here. Now, if you want to see my overall thought process behind how I graded this class, you can go ahead and skip to the end of this video, or you can stick around through the best selections portion. The best picks of this draft class in terms of the divisions and all of that, Bo Limmer, DJ James, and Christian Jones, I believe, were all A-plus picks for the Rams, Seattle, and Cardinals, respectively. And then I believe Dorian Taylor-Demerson, Tyler Davis were A-minus grades for the Cardinals and Rams, and then Jared Verse and Trey Benson were two of my favorite B-plus grades in this draft class. And you can kind of see here there might be a theme in terms of how I rank these draft classes here in a moment. And these are the rankings here. I've got San Francisco with a C-plus grade. They're last in the division, and I'm going to be honest with you, somebody's got to be last in terms of the NFL. There's 32 teams. If you're going to rank them 32-1, somebody's got to be 32, and San Francisco is a contender right now. Seattle, B-plus, like the draft, got some good value, got some starters and immediate impact players, solid group. The Rams, putting them at 2 was kind of tough because I really liked this draft class for them. I think they did a lot of good things, a lot of things I would have done if I was in some way, shape, or form qualified to do things and run an NFL franchise, which I'm not. But, I really like that draft class for the Rams. I think they got multiple starters, even down the board. I think they're getting impact players day one. That's a sneaky good team this year in the NFC. But ultimately, I decided that Arizona was the better of the two draft classes. And a lot of that was just because they had so many good picks, and they had so many picks. So I guess you could say that if you have so many picks, you're going to have more picks. The more picks you have, the more good picks you have. I guess you could say that. But I don't know. I went down to it, and we're kind of splitting hairs a little bit, but ultimately I do believe the Cardinals did have the best draft class here. And I think a lot of that had to do with specifically their selections on day 3, which were just phenomenal. They nailed day 3, maybe the best of anybody in the entire draft, in my opinion. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole giving you his opinion on the internet. It's at this point I'd like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with me at any point, or you just have something to say, go ahead and leave a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.